You're making noise, can you make me quiet?
I don't see them. And I don't
Send
see,
them the wrong one. Did I send them the wrong one?
I think that's the wrong one. That's not the one that,
Shit. It's the one on the lunch and learn.
486553187.
Um. 486553187, right?
Yeah. I don't think that's what you're on here.
Really?
Here, can I look at your computer for a second?
Yeah. I didn't log into it.
What?
But that might have been the one I sent them. Oh, here's the 187. Let's see what I sent them. I sent them the wrong one. Damn it. All right, let me go and fix that.
All right, let's tell them.
And let me get Mel up here. Let me just send that to them there.
לישראלים יש אתר משונה, צריך להחליף לאתר משונה של זום. אז אנחנו ניתן את המספרים עוד מעט. יש עוד אתר. Oh, here, Yardeni Shai is into the one. Yarden is in. Yeah.
I'll send the right one now then.
And
Shall I send it to my family?
Yes, will you do that? It ends in 187.
Okay.
now we got to get this on
Yes,
that.
I gotta do that too.
Yeah, so I'm here. I just tried to go into the other link and it worked. So
Okay. So
I
once
hope my connection is good.
187, right? 486553187.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sending the right. Sent that.
Yeah, I'm sending it. I'm sending it to my family now. So. Yeah, because I could have seen. Oh no, it's good.
Oh, I lost her. Oh, Ine.
Hey, Gary, how you doing?
Boy, there's.
Hey, Gary. How are you? Doing okay?
Better now.
Hey.
Hello. We gotta get we're gonna get the other location on.
Okay.
Cousins. We are fortunate to have from Israel my cousin Yarden Ishai and my cousin Noga Ishai and some other Ishais watching along, Ofer and Ayelet and kids. It's great to see you. But why don't we get started? Yarden, why don't I ask you first the question and then Rabbi Eric. Tell us about yourself and where you work. Go ahead.
Hey, so I hope you can hear me, guys. Could you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, talk louder and go for it.
Cool. Okay, so my name is Yarden Ishai. I'm 31 and I live in Tel Aviv. I was born in Jerusalem. And I'm a high school teacher, educator. I teach civics and I am a home teacher for 10th grade students in a second chance high school. So that means that my students they dropped out one of the big high schools in Tel Aviv. It's a public high school and I've been teaching there for the last 7 years. So that's me.
That's great. Thank you, Yarden. And Noga, why don't you also introduce yourself and tell us where you live and what you're doing. Go ahead, Noga.
Okay, so hello, my name is Noga. I live in Hadera. This is more in northern than Tel Aviv.
We just
And,
need everybody else to make sure they mute for us. But go ahead,
Yeah.
Noga. Sorry.
I'm married to Liron. I have 3 kids, 9 years old, 7 years old, and 2 years old. And I have several jobs. As a self-employed, I'm a family advisor. I help parents in parenthood advisors and everything relate to relationships and communication. And this is my area. I also work for the recent 7 years, something like that, at schools, and I empower kids with their studies, and I help them in an alternative ways to study, and more to help them emotionally with their to help them to study while they're emotionally available.
Okay, I'm going to introduce you to Rabbi Eric, who has some questions. So Eric, go for it.
So first of all, excuse me, thank you to everyone for being here, and especially to our Israeli friends who are here. I hope you see just by the number of people who have turned up to hear from you and to learn together that the Jewish community is very activated at this point in time. We are very much our Libenu b'Mizrach, right? We are really very much, our hearts are with you. And more on this later, but several of us who are on this call and who are others as well are actually not just Libenu b'Mizrach, but Niyeh b'Mizrach. We are actually going to come and visit several of us. And I know that Len was recently with you because we are feeling drawn towards just the Jewish people. But my question is this, for those of our Israeli friends who are here. After October 7th and the atrocities and the horrors of October 7th that have touched all of us, and especially those in Israel, how did your community or you or your families, what changed in life in terms of helping one another, in terms of the community reaching out to those who have people maybe who are serving on Miluim, on Sahal, so those who were, have families who were affected specifically by loss or by people, being kidnapped or whatever. How has the community sort of risen up to support one another within the borders of Israel? Obviously, we know what Sahal is doing. We know what the IDF is doing, and so important that it is. But what has been your experience of people helping echad l'sheni, one to another?
Where I live in Hadera, there is a huge community of women that they really support each other. And I feel like there is a huge gathering that everyone really want to help each other and support, if it's helping with food or with allocate money for soldiers or families, or games for the people that came from all over the country and they have no place to live right now. And in my point of view, in a daily basis, we need help all the time. There are lots of volunteers that help, sometimes with the kids, sometimes comes to help with laundry, and this is my needs. And I feel like everyone trying to find their own way to contribute somehow. We also get help, but I feel that I want to contribute as well. This is a circle of giving, and it's very huge, and you can feel it everywhere.
Yeah, Dan, did you want to say?
I would say, yeah. So as you said, Rabbi Eric, I think there is no one over Israel, all over the place, Jewish over the world, and everyone else. October 7th did not affect them. My partner in October 7th went to
Yarden, you're breaking up a little bit. Maybe just talk a little bit louder if you can.
Or you can turn off your picture. If you turn off your picture, sometimes the sound is better. The קשה לשמוע.
Noga, were you able to hear?
No, קשה
Yeah.
לשמוע.
Noga, were you able to
I
hear?
just, I just heard, I just don't want to talk in Yarden behalf. So
it
maybe
better?
Yarden can try. Yes, good. Yarden?
Can you hear me now better?
Yes. Go ahead.
No.
Yarden, go ahead.
Okay. Yarden started to say that her partner is also in reserve. This is the only thing I heard her, what you said.
She's told me about the fact that the teachers in her school seem to support each other because many of them have partners who are in the reserve. And Yarden's partner, I forget where he's serving, but he comes back occasionally on weekends, but otherwise it's very difficult. And that's part of life now for many ordinary Israelis.
She's coming back.
Yes, this is a new routine that we need to deal with. It's not easy to manage your life when you used to have a partner and all of a sudden it was all of a sudden just it had to go. It was immediate. Maybe Yarden can try to speak. Yarden?
Yes, I'm here. I hope you hear me
Good.
now. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yes, good.
I'm sorry. So I don't know what did Noah said, but I just want to say me and Noah were sisters and
Yarden, we have unfortunately the same issue. And let me ask, while
we
Yarden,
were supposed to meet for lunch, all the sisters or sisters, and
Okay.
Noga, let me
So-
ask you.
She could text.
Yeah, Noga, let me ask you what it was like in the first couple of weeks after October 7th for you and your community.
That was disaster, actually. Simple actions I couldn't do. I was afraid to drop the bin. I was really afraid. I was anxious. That was a non-logical even fear, because that was anxiety. And we were really shocked, everyone. There was no school, no daycares, and a lot of family just all of a sudden have to get the new reality. And it was shocking, and still I don't think we are still understand what happened. It comes with waves, and it will take us some time to process what happened. And this is a new routine, and it seems like we adjust, but I'm not sure, and I'm not sure yet. So many changes, and I can tell in my point of view. My husband is there from this Saturday, the 7th, and he comes every 3 weeks, something like that. And once he comes, it's not easy as well, because he has to adjust to a different place. And I need to adjust him, and the kids need to adjust him, and there is everyone are overwhelmed in a bad way. So there is a lot of emotions, and right now I'm like one parent that needs to deal with everything, and I wasn't ready for that. I didn't choose that, and there is a lot of stress to balance the home, the kids, and work, and it's a familiar challenge, but now there is an extra feelings and extra emotions and that comes with it, and we miss him, and we worry about him, and we're sad about what happened in general for everyone. There is no one person that doesn't know in another circle someone from the party or someone from the areas that the disaster happened. So we always know someone, and we are taking that with us every day, and it's hard. It's not easy, but we are finding. I feel like we are we are coping with that is to find an inner strength and to look for the spots that we have some, light, and to get some hope from everything we can.
Thank you. Noga, one other question. The way that the community sort of organized to support one another, did that come sort of organically, sort of automatically, or did it come with government help or with other organizations' help? Yeah, it's an important point. But
yeah, this is the Israeli mood. This is the Israeli energy. It comes from the people. I think that the most of the contribution came from the people, and I didn't. The government they have their own rhythm, but we inside of us, the support, the gathering, it's so strong. This is the Israeli spirit. It's stronger than everything, and I feel bad that we see it only when something bad happened. I think we should keep it for all the time, not just for bad time. But in bad times, we can feel the spirit, and it comes from the inside and the communities. And we have WhatsApp groups, and we have Facebook forums, and there is so much initiation. People initiate all the time a way to contribute and to take part and to see others. So it gathers, it makes this huge gathering between everyone, but it's the Israeli spirit.
thank you. That, I think, is a really important for our gathering here to know, especially the Americans. We, when something tragic happens, while there certainly are very often communal outpourings, they happen very often or are incentivized through governmental channels. FEMA, for example, right, for those who are Israelis, FEMA is our disaster response agency, but FEMA is very much a governmental agency, so much so that in order for FEMA to work, a governor has to declare a state of emergency. There's a whole system of that, and we kind of wait for the government, not wait, but we expect the government to act in a certain way. And much of what at least I saw when I was in Israel at the very end of October and beginning of November, and what we're hearing also from Noga, and I think many of us have heard, is that the organization of this altruism, this helping one another, rose up from it was so grassroots, it was even below the grass of the roots, and that is something that Noga, you said it's the Israeli spirit that does this. And I think that's what's going to take us into our Jewish learning today, because that is very different. In Jerusalem, for example, in north central Jerusalem, one of the what are called the Hamal, the Cheder Milchama, which means sort of like command centers of the helping and giving, the collecting of donations and getting them to the displaced families and everything like that. was a place called Lev Echad. And it was a week before October 7th. Lev Echad was actually two very different groups. One was protesting the government, and one was supporting the government. And the second that literally the afternoon of October 7th, which was Simchat Torah and Shmini Atzeret and Shabbat, and obviously chaos in Israel, as Noga said, they called one another and said, we're putting it all aside. There's something bigger. And it's been entirely, almost exclusively volunteer run since then. Shipping needs, people basically make what we would consider Amazon orders, right? They say, I need a size 5 diapers, shampoo, and Brussels sprouts. And then it goes, and it's getting shipped to the doorways of in hotels in many places all over the place. Now, the government has subsidized the hotel cost of displacement, but so much of this has come from the people, and that is a decidedly different feel than in the United States, where we, for better or for worse, legislate altruism. For those who are not at Israel, take the sheets that Rachel gave you or is giving you right now. And good, you've got them. And I'm making a segue here into our teaching. And I want to, before we do that, certainly give Len the opportunity to say hi to his relatives, because if you have to, it's getting later, especially for the kids. If you have to pop off, you're welcome to stay for our learning, our limud here. But thank you for giving us a firsthand view of what's going on in Israel. And do you want to say a shalom to your family?
It's amazing to see you, and thank you for joining us. And feel free to stick around or not for the next 45 minutes, and we can see if anyone has questions for you after. But amazing to be with you and see you. And go ahead, Eric.
Okay, absolutely.
So bye guys, and I'm sorry if you didn't hear me. So I hope I'm sure Noga spoke for me. So
She did. Toda Yarden.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I just want to thank you again. And I wish for a better time, and that we will keep our Israeli spirit also when it's good and not when it's bad. And we will keep our proportions. Yeah, thank you.
We are with you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye, Ellen.
All right. Toda. So, here in the United States, one of the, I guess you would say, benefits of working for a nonprofit is that the government has decided to incentivize your altruism by every time someone gives tzedakah to a nonprofit, if that nonprofit is registered as such through the government, it incentivizes you in terms of your taxes. Me too, all of us, right? And on the one hand, one might say, well, that's not really altruism then, because people do it for the sake of a tax write-off. Did you get 50, 100, 150 emails, right? Between December 29th and December 31st saying this is your last chance to get the tax write-offs. So on the one hand, maybe it's not altruism. On the other hand, it is a government stating a value of giving to causes and efforts, whether they be educational or religious or healing hospitals or museums or any of the, cultural. The government is saying, we want people to feel motivated to support these things in ways that the government is not of our own. The government gives certain cultural grants, but not enough, right? And so we're saying, how can we do that? How can we do that? And the government essentially is trying to, what the title says here, legislate altruism, or legally incentivize goodness, as it were, right? And so most of the reports of what has happened in Israel, Israel's social service net is much thinner than America's. And part of that is because Israel spends a ridiculously high percentage of its GDP on defense. a lot of this, most of this comes from the hearts and the work of average Israelis. It is supported institutionally. So, for example, I mentioned that the government is essentially giving subsidies to hotels that are not going to fill with tourists at this time, so that displaced persons can. It helps the hotels. It helps the displaced persons, and the government is spending millions, if not billions, of shekels on this. The government has, helped in other ways as well. But what we do, but it is very much coming from the spirit, as Noga said, from the spirit of Israelis. And so what we are, and this has happened before, by the way. It's not the first time that this has happened. I think that's important to know. I remember when I was in Israel during the Second Lebanon War in 2006, that summer, right? Where we have ticker tape on the bottom, like CNN, giving the news, right? The ticker tape was, because the rockets were coming from the north, right? So it was family in Beersheba can house 4. Summer camp opening for kids, anyone Tiberias and north can come south for a week. Like things like that. That was what the ticker tape was. So it's supported by the institutions, but it's not governmentally legislated, as it were, right? Even that is communally. The TVs were doing it, right? The TV stations were doing it. So what we're going to learn about today is whether it's possible to either incentivize or make legally necessary goodness. And this is a place that Judaism both is excellent and struggles, right? So any questions or comments before we hop into some of the text? Because I think most of them are going to, guide themselves. But if we'll start online at Adath Israel or here, if anyone has a question or comment or a response to what you've heard or seen, what's going on in Israel, how this is an important aspect of the war effort. And it has happened, by the way, it's happened in past war efforts here too. You have certainly during World War II, where there were so many GIs going abroad that you had people had to step into the factories to actually make the things. You had like the, Rosie the Riveter kind of stuff going on. But there's, so we see this. But Joy, go ahead.
I just have a comment. It's not related to Israel per se, but I know that Europe, as each country, they give more of their GDP to philanthropy as a country than
we do, for sure.
And I don't know how that started, but it's always been. I mean, through my work, I found that out. So it's sort of interesting that I guess people just expect a certain part of their paycheck to go to it.
Right. The amount they are taxed is higher overall. The social service net is deeper by far. I mean, socialized medicine, things like that. But also culture, education, even religious education is largely state supported. Day schools, for example, are supported by Britain. They get significant government funding, and not just for security.
Carl Schneider.
You got it. Any other comments on that?
I would just like to mention that I had occasion to get to know a man by the name of Scott Friedman, who many of you know from the Union Fire Association in Ballackinwood. And I was working with him, and he said, well, I'm going to be away for a couple of weeks. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Israel. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, there's a system in Israel that when things happen that require the reservists who are firemen to leave, people from all over the world who are firemen go there to fill those spots. And when he came back, I asked him about what it was like. And he described the fact that it's unbelievable to see people that would normally be in an offices picking oranges and doing things that everybody's chipping in. And then he told me that Friday night, he and his wife were getting ready to have dinner, and somebody knocked on his door. No one ever knocks on our door. He said there was a couple there, and they said, we know you have a son who is in the IDF, and we are here from the Friends of the IDF, and we are here to bring you challah and wine for Shabbos. Makes me chills to say it.
Yeah.
And he said it was the most unbelievable experience, that he had no idea that this was going to happen, and it meant so much to him. So
could people hear that on Zoom? Could you hear the comment? Good. Want to make sure that's what we're talking about, right? It's small gestures and it is substantive gestures. Those people who are going down to, pick oranges, for example, or avocados, that is the livelihood of the displaced families in the South, right? If those, and it's a small window for each crop, and if those things don't get picked and they lie fallow on the trees or the vines or whatever it may be, the destruction that was wrought on October 7th is compounded by an economic inability to rebuild once they can return. The good news coming out of the past 3 or 4 days, is that the displaced families from the South, by and large, are starting to return, not necessarily to their kibbutzim, but to semi-permanent dwellings that have been set up near their kibbutzim so that they can start to regain some sense of normalcy if they are in agriculture. A lot of the agriculture, by the way, it wasn't even so much that they were picking, they were managing the shipping and things like that. The other group that they lost is their workforce, which was in part, you heard, why are there so many Thai kidnapped people, is because they were in large numbers, thousands of Thai workers come to Israel and send their paycheck home, either as seasonal workers or as longer-term workers. And they were among the people kidnapped in large numbers, something like 30 Thai workers. The other group of people who are not able to harvest or work right now on the border kibbutzim were Gazans, who had work permits, who allowed them to cross every day, make much better wages, live much better lives, oftentimes receive medical treatment if they needed visa through their vis-a-vis their employers and things like that. And of course, again, another instance of how Hamas has victimized the population in Gaza. Of course, that border is by necessity closed at this point in time. And so I think it's something like 10,000 workers a day. That's not a small number that pass for different reasons and different amounts of employment. And so the economic compounding of the issue is what the volunteers are. And that's why, for example, people are going as well. Any other questions or comments either on Zoom, in the burbs, or right at this table with me?
Rabbi, it's Bob. I have a question. In my recent travels, as you know, my family landed in Israel in the airport on October 7th in the evening, and we were shocked to find out what had been going on. The short story there is we did get out several days later, but I wanted to ask on the topics that's being discussed today. I called the 2 hotels, one in Zichron Yaakov in the north and another in Sde Boker in the south, where I had paid and had a reservation, and I asked them if they could cancel the reservation, notwithstanding the cancellation policy that was not applicable. And they immediately said, don't worry about it. There's going to be no charge. I wonder if that's a governmentally mandated thing, or is it just altruistic on the part of all of the hospitality businesses that they would just let everybody off the hook?
I don't know. I mean, look, I think there are those situations. Even airlines will do the same thing where, like, if the State Department says you can't travel there are policies. I don't know specifically what the policy is here. And a lot of the policies there were governmentally stipulated because not at the beginning in the north, though Sde Boker, I'm guessing, was not an evacuee location, just by virtue of how much of a margin of error they were giving. They were getting governmental subsidies to house. It was amazing. When I was there, I was in a hotel where they had 2 floors for guests coming in, or volunteers coming in, or dignitaries coming in, or doctors coming in, or I guess firemen coming in, things like that. And then everything else, you saw people, I mean, you could tell because like people are hanging their laundry over the balconies. I mean, it's really like, it was really like an odd living situation, but I don't know what the government's stipulations on those things were. But it was a communal effort. There's no question about it. Let's jump into some of the text just so we get a sense that I always like to bring text to show you that I didn't make this up, that it actually is about 2,000 years old. What Noga is describing as this Israeli spirit comes with a long runway, as it were, right, to bring us into it. And so I want to just share with you a couple of these texts. I'm going to move through a lot of them very quickly. Because I think they, as I said, I think they kind of explain themselves, but I wanted them to give us a sort of Jewish textual basis, a foundational piece for this spirit of grassroots communal effort. The baseline for this, the one that is on the bottom of every Jewish philanthropy flyer that is trying to increase social justice in the world or helping Jews helping one another in the world, the one that is the most I would say well-known of these is Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh. All of Israel, all the Jewish people essentially are Arevim one to another. And the reason I didn't translate that word is because it's a great Hebrew word. Sometimes it's translated as we're all responsible for one another. That is a dilution of what it means. Sometimes in more legal terminologies, when it's being used in that way, we are guarantors of one another, meaning like you basically co-signing other people's liabilities, right? Okay. That is legally what that word means. It is a word that is used, by the way, in the ketubah. It is, meaning like we are, if my spouse makes a vow, I am liable for that vow, that kind of thing, right? Okay. But the word means so much more than that. It means to be all intermixed with one another, intertwined with one another. So, for example, Arevim comes from the same root in Hebrew as Erev. Erev is evening, the time when daylight and darkness are intermingled. And it's hard to extract one from the other. The rabbis, for example, when they were trying to figure out Shabbos candle lighting times, don't like Erev. They want to know when it's not Shabbat and then when it is Shabbat. And that's why your calendar, courtesy of Goldstein's or Levine's, says that Shabbat started last week, I think at 4:26, and everyone laughs and says that is rather precise. And it is, because the rabbis don't like this, right? They want to know this and this. But the fact is that so much of life and the way that we live our lives is much more this, right? It's much more interconnected. Those of you who have, I would say, about a decade at Adath Israel may recall a moment on the high holidays where I inadvertently turned the entire sanctuary into a bunch of kittens. I was trying to demonstrate what it meant, what it felt like to be Arevim. This is a worth repeating one, right? And so I had a couple of spools of yarn that I had ushers hand out at different places in the sanctuary. And I asked people to toss the balls of yarn one to another, down off the balcony, up to the balcony, across section to section. So we created this kind of web, right? Now, I started this thinking it would take about 10 seconds and people were having too much fun. It took about a full minute of people. Like, that's why I said, I think I just turned you all into kittens, right? Okay, because everyone's playing with spools of yarn, right? But then I said, now tug on it. And you feel the tug, meaning symbolically the need of someone else, right? You feel needed when that interconnectivity happens. That's what Arevim or Arevut is the noun form. It really is. Yes, Bob.
In a class that I took years ago, I was going into the actually to teaching certification, and the professor, first day, did the same thing with yarn.
There you go. I didn't make it up. I told you I don't make any of this stuff up.
And then at the very end, he said, we're gonna do this again and see how much scaffolding you guys need.
Very nice.
Scaffolding, not to, to the fact of support for one another.
Good. That's exactly what this is. This is support of one another. And so when we do this, we have this sense of this innate sense. Some of you may remember just having a JNF pushka or any other tzedakah, right? That before Shabbos, someone would put a couple of coins in, and you would say, "What's that going to?" This is especially if it was before the state of Israel, right? If you remember, or if you hear stories of, and people would say, "It's going to people in Israel." What did that even mean then? Now we have Zoom, right? We could see Noga and Yarden, right? We didn't even know what that was. It was, there are Jews, their lives are more difficult than mine. I'm sending them a nickel. That is arevut. That is interconnectedness. That's what we're talking about here. And it really, it comes from, it predates the Talmud. And this idea of it is in fact very, very sort of foundational to how Jewish communal organizations have. There are stories in the Talmud of the ways in which people you would go and people would set up a shtetl, right? And what would they do to set up a shtetl? They would set up a cemetery. They would sanctify land as a cemetery. They would build a mikveh. And they would set up like basically an orphans and needy council, right? And that before they had a shul, they didn't have a shul yet. They didn't have a school. They didn't have their own shops and things like that. It was just like, okay, what are we doing? Oh, you okay? Okay. That's what we're talking about. That's the sort of altruism that we're talking about. Now, the question is, what happens if people don't innately have that, or they don't have it at the levels needed to sustain the society and its needs at that level? Can we say, well, it's not so altruistic, we're going to give a tax break for it, or it's not so altruistic, we're going to pressure people into it, or we're going to, in Sephardic shuls, auction off the aliyahs, right? Okay, and stuff like that, which is like if you've ever seen it happen, by the way, it's amazing. It's weird, it's amazing, it's hysterical. On Shabbos, on Yom Kippur, right? On Yom Kippur, the gabbai stands up and goes, and the biggest one, the one that gets the most, what number aliyah do you think gets the most?
3 or 7.
3. 3 gets the most, because you're not a Kohen, you're not a Levi. You get the first one you can't get, right?
To defend the Sfardim, Ashkenazic shuls used to do it too.
You don't need to defend them. It's very effective. But could you imagine if I stopped, right? We get the Torah on the Shulchan, Yom Kippur, and I say, all right, hey, give me a shlishi, give me a shlishi, give me a shlishi, give me a shlishi, hey, give me a shlishi, shlishi. You can imagine that's what we're talking about here. But they do it super fast. And why do they do it super fast? 2 reasons. One funny, one real for what we're talking about. The funny one is people want to get to Kiddush. The longer the auction takes,
On Yom Kippur?
not on Yom Kippur, right? But on Shabbos, right? Okay, people want to get through service. They don't want this to take a long time. The real reason is, why is it? Because people know. First of all, they know who's going to give. They know how much they're going to give, and they go in ready to give. Right? That's what this is. And that's like a silly one, right? But they say, okay, so what if it's not so altruistic? Because I really want the honor, the covet of the third aliyah, right? Not quite as altruistic, right? There is a teaching, and this is the second teaching you have. I'm just giving you this.
Can't share the screen, I guess, right?
Oh, sorry, I should have shared the screen. Yes, I'm going to share this. Here we go. Give me a second. Here it is. Now the people on Zoom can see. Here you go. Here we go. Now the people on Zoom can see. Sorry about that. I completely forgot. There we go. It's the second text we're looking at. I'll point to it right here. There it is. There's a question of whether you do things for their own sake, for purely, for altruism, what we call in Hebrew lishma, for its own, in its own name or its own sake, right? And the one they're talking about in this particular, in Maimonides' text, is about Torah study. Like, I could study Torah for a number of reasons. I could study Torah to show everyone how smart I am. I could study Torah because someone's paying me to study Torah. There are plenty of organizations that pay you to study Torah. I could study Torah because I have theoretically a class that I might have to prepare for and teach, not because I'm, interested in the topic, but I just need to prepare for my class because I get a salary for teaching a class, right? All of those are not lishma reasons. And then look at what the boldface is at the bottom. I'll show you on here. It says, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. This is a great, let's talk about scaffolding, Bob. This is a great Jewish teaching. Even something that is not being done for its own sake, its intrinsic value, its altruistic value, if you encourage people, meaning it's no longer altruism because you're giving them something for it, you're stoking the fire a little bit, it'll come to be for its own sake. Okay? We start with an extrinsic motivator, and eventually people of their own sake become it. By the way, I'm just out of this stage of life, so I can tell you the classic example of this. This works. And if you were a parent of young children, you know this. This works with potty training. My kids, every time they said, I have to use the potty, they got an M&M or something very small at the beginning. My 17-year-old no longer requires an M&M, right? Mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, right? My 4-year-old, it's a recent memory, right? She just turned 5, right? Okay, so eventually someone will see the value of it. So you might say this. I'll give you examples of this. The first 100 donors get a T-shirt. Right? Or first-time donors get some incentive, some swag, some something or other. If it's your first-time donors, I'll tell you, this is one that is sort of in the gray area of this. The first time my wife and I ever gave what for us was a big gift. We were early in our marriage, and JTS, Jewish Theological Seminary, said, it was end of year giving, and they said, we have a donor. They contacted all young alumni.
Matching.
Yes, matching, right? And they contacted all along, but it was a matching with a floor, this was the thing. They wanted to push us. We had given, 118, 180, whatever we could give, right? They said, if you can push yourself to give $1,000, we were 5 years out of rabbinical school. That's still a sizable gift, right? If you can push yourself to give $1,000, that $1,000 is going to become $3,600, like that, because they had a donor who was doing a challenge grant, right? Okay, and I saw that, and I called my wife and I said, it was December and it was Hanukkah and it was all the things, and they pushed every button right, and I said, do you think we could do this? And she said, I think we can do it. And that was the first time we gave a gift that was of that size. And it was, it was shortly after I was a student, 4 or 5 years after I was a student. That was for us a big gift, right? And the reason that it worked, the number is not the point. The reason is that it motivated me in a different way, right?
I've always wondered about the honesty of the matching. Like,
are they going to give it anyway?
Are they giving that anyway?
Well, remember, for them too, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, right? If they really believe in the cause and they say, I'll match up to $250,000, I'm making it up, right? Something like that. You're asking, are they giving the $250,000?
Anyway, can we make it a matching thing?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure
I've always just
of
had my
course that is the case. Of course that is the case. But what you're doing, and also, by the way, one of the things of mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma is whether you give anonymously or in name. And Maimonides says, we're talking about Maimonides here, Maimonides says that giving anonymously is a higher level of giving. But in a world where altruism is not automatic, that's not always the case. I have said to people on behalf of Edith Israel and other causes, I have said, can we use your name? And some people say, no, I don't want my name. And I understand that and I value that and I obviously respect that and I would never violate that. But also, I sometimes say, if I can use your name for this very generous gift, it will inspire other people and set other people's bar of giving at a certain level that will multiply the effect even of your gift. Just the fact that they know that the X family has invested highly in this cause, they'll say, because they're sitting at the same Starbucks or wherever it is, right? And they're talking, they're saying, I see that you were one of the foundational donors to this campaign or something like that. Tell me more. And there's an idea of being what's called a dugma, which is an exemplar or an inspiration in some way.
Leadership grants.
Right, exactly, leadership grants. So let's go through a couple more of these texts. I'm mindful of the time, and obviously we could talk about this topic, for a very long time, because sometimes, by the way, altruism is not enough. Not only mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, because you need to, give M&Ms to your potty training kids or challenge grants or any of these sorts of things, right? But sometimes you actually need self-interest. You need tax breaks. Self-interest is a big thing. In Judaism, one of the translations of self-interest is yetzer hara, if you've heard that term, which is usually misinterpreted as the evil inclination, right? And you can see that I couldn't even allow myself, I think it's a terrible translation. So I said, I put the evil inclination in here in the translation, but I bracketed evil or self-interested inclination, because that's really what it is, right? It really is and oftentimes the effect is evil, don't get me wrong. Oftentimes saying there are two, I don't know why I have M&Ms on my head. There are two pieces of candy on the table. I want candy. I know that the just thing to do would be to share the candy, but I want a lot of candy. And so I take that candy, both pieces. That's yetzer hara. It is self-interested. Yetzer hara gets a little more complicated, though, if there's one piece of candy on the table. And I am equally justified and deserving of that piece of candy as any of you. And we all stare at the last piece of cake or the last candy or whatever it is, right? You've all seen the last little bit of orange juice in the container that no one wants to pour out, right? Okay, right? The same thing. And who's going to take it? And someone should take it. And so what we say about yetzer hara is that actually when it says at the moment of creation of humankind in the story of creation, end of chapter 1 of Genesis, it says, God saw, sixth day, God saw, and behold, hine tov me'od. Most of the days it says, v'hine tov. God saw that it was good, right? Why is it tov me'od? Why is it very good? The rabbis say it's very good because not only did God create our goodness, God created our badness, or our self-interestedness. And it says here, were it not for the yetzer hara, for the self-interested inclination, no one would ever marry or ever have children. Elsewhere it says in a similar version, or build a house. And the end up would be that the world could not be sustained. Imagine for a second if I were so selfless, so giving, so altruistic, that I fell in love with my wife, but I was so selfless that I said, she's really great. Some other person should have her. Someone else would be so happy sharing a life with her. That would not be good for me, but it also wouldn't be good for the world if everyone did that.
For her.
Well, I would like to think for her, but I think that's a little more debatable. But but that's what we're saying here. Imagine if you found a beautiful piece of property, empty, unclaimed, whatever, and you said, "This would be a beautiful place to set up our homestead, to build a future together." Oh, but it's so beautiful that someone else would really enjoy it too. You would never build your house. You never build your household. The world could never be built. We need people to step forward, sometimes in self-interest, right? So altruism isn't all it's cracked up to be sometimes. Sometimes you got to step up. I'm going to go through these very fast. Sometimes it's a critical moment called Sha'at Hadchak, which means that all bets are off. Even much halacha is suspended during Sha'at Hadchak. If it's a bad time, a lot of halacha, a lot of Jewish law is just suspended because we need people to just step in, right? Sometimes in messy ways, right? The stories of the afternoon of October 7th are real examples of that, right? We sit here, and frankly, the stories of ever since, right? We sit here very comfortably in the suburbs or in downtown or online, and we say, oh, this war would be much better run if they did it this way. You know what we're not doing? Getting shot at, right? It's the Mike Tyson quote. I don't normally quote Mike Tyson, but he's right on this one. It's all, everyone's got a plan until someone up and punches you in the mouth, right? Everyone's got a plan until someone up and punches you in the mouth, right? There was no plan for October 7th. Now we can say now that was a failure of the security establishment, but that is a luxury to say, right? That's Sha'at Hadchak. It's never ideal. I'll just say what the rest of these texts are, and then we'll open it up in the last couple minutes for comments. The reason I put this text is actually only symbolic. The last text on the first page. I love this this saying in Tractate Makot. There's this whole series of inadvertent deaths. Okay, and for which people are not liable. And but the idea is that you're sticking your neck out or you're sticking your head out into something, right? Rabbi Danny Siegel had for many decades the Giraffe Project. Why giraffe? Because giraffes have no choice but to stick their neck out, right? That's the idea, right? But one of the ways that they say this is that someone was chopping wood or throwing stones for any number of reasons, and someone else put their head out and caught the stone. It's a great image, right? The idea is if I extend myself, I might get hit, right? But the other person may or may not be liable. The idea here is, it's just like, it's the way also kids say, well, yes, I was swinging that baseball bat, but his head went there, right? Okay, like that's what we're saying.
Put his face in the way.
Right, he put his face in the way of my fist, right? Exactly, exactly. So these are the types of things that you that you have. There are times, when self-sacrifice in the ultimate ways, this is the Kiddush Hashem thing, is there. And then there are times, I'm looking at the middle text on the back page, the Deuteronomy text, and then we're going to just close out. When there's this whole text in Parshat Kitei, not Parshat Kitei, I think it's Shoftim, where right before a battle, people say, hey, they line the troops up and say, hey, does anyone plant a vineyard? Did anyone plant a vineyard that you haven't harvested? You shouldn't go to battle. As altruistic as that is, to do the greater good. Did anyone betroth a woman and not yet marry and consummate that marriage? You shouldn't be going to battle. These are the types of things that they say. And the idea is that we assume that there's a whole slew of people who are coming to reserve duty, essentially, right? And They're dropping everything to go. This, by the way, is what is going on in Israel. Israel called up 200,000 troops. 350,000 troops showed up. Right? Every one of those people had a vineyard or a business or a spouse or a child or obligation to someone or a hobby or food in the refrigerator that's spoiled. However big, however small. Every one of those people dropped everything and showed up the next day. 350,000 people. It's an immense number. It's an incredible number of people showing up. And that's why I put this overwhelming outpouring, the idea of giving for the tabernacle, that Moses actually had to stop people giving. It was the only giving campaign ever where people said, stop giving me money. And then this other idea of sort of self-effacing is that there's this idea of mipnei darchei shalom, that you should do things because they're in the name of peace, of the greater good. Anyway, I'm gonna stop sharing here. Any questions or comments? I moved as quickly as I could through the text, but the idea here is that Judaism is trying to, if not legislate, at least incentivize or encourage through value statements, this idea that there is a greater good that we should be cognizant of. This idea of interconnectedness, this idea of be altruistic, the idea of don't be so altruistic. You know, you gave too much. You shouldn't be here lining up for the army. You should be home with your betrothed bride or whatever it is. You know, like these things. There's an idea that altruism is there and is asked for or mandated or legislated. And I think what Noga said was really important, that like it just rose up, right? Because there aren't the same sort of incentivized things governmentally. Good. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts?
The only thing I was going to say was, I was asked one time by a non-Jew as to why Jewish people write checks. Why are we always at the forefront giving? One of my comments was that we're taught at an early age to give. For me, I remember going to the old Temple Sinai and
Washington Lane.
Right, Washington Lane and Limekiln Pike with Rabbi Greenberg, and we went to Ghana. My mother would give me every Friday a quarter.
Oh, yeah. We still do that at Israel.
So the kids are taught early on. That's with you from a very young age. Give
and however much,
right?
Amount is irrelevant, right? Because the amount is a different meaning to each person, right? But that idea of sort of institution, it is documented that Jews disproportionately give, though there are other people who give as well. I'm not minimizing that, but it is true, and it becomes at an early age. My kids' piggy banks or whatever have 3 slots, right? Save, spend, give, right? And the idea, and the slots are the same, right? The idea is that something needs to go into whatever you got. Something needs to go into all 3 of those.
Tzedakah was a very well-known word.
Yeah, tzedakah. It's arguably, if you know 10 Jewish words, that's probably one of them. Chutzpah may be one of them.
And every house had a blue box.
A pushka, right? A pushka. Yeah.
See if anybody at the synagogue or online has a comment or question. Don't want to leave you guys out.
So I'd like to make a question. So the title was can you legislate altruism? And we started out talking about the government providing tax incentives for altruistic causes. And I think that's something that we should understand, that the real basis for that is that the government shouldn't interfere in altruism. It's not a matter of legislating it. It's a matter of, the power to tax is the power to destroy to a certain extent. And that what we really, altruism comes from the heart, not from the government, is what I just wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Before I forget, I mentioned this in passing. We have only a couple more spots left if people do want to go to Israel January 21st to 28th to volunteer and to bear witness. We have a couple more spots we're closing it up this week. We opened it up last week. But if you're interested, please email me, or you can put it in the chat if you're on there. We can accommodate 1 or 2 more people. That's it.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question. The Deuteronomy passage that you referred to, Rabbi, doesn't, the part that you included didn't include anything about what those folks to whom the leaders were addressing, what they did as a result of being asked, or the suggestion being given to them that they consider peeling off and not joining the force. Was there anything more in that passage?
So I think it's true of most laws in the Torah. We don't know how much people listened.
Right. That's a better way of saying.
But the assumption is that people did get, it's more about the value statement of getting military exemption, on this, right? Or altruistic exemption in the case of, of these things.
It's a really powerful passage.
Yeah. Could you imagine, but yet during Vietnam, there were things of similar, if you, at certain points in time in the war, if you were in college, if you, that you would be exempt from the drift, right? These things are theoretically possible.
Well, and I guess then the next step was the volunteer force.
Right.
Right. And
So every year I do something called Sucking Kapores.
Yeah.
And people is, why am I taking $1, putting it in the pushka of that? It's the nature of it. It's our nature. It's our nature to give as Jews.
That's correct. Our nature is to give. And I think it is, in fact, legislated, or at least instituted in a deep way. Anyway, I want to thank everyone, especially Len, your family, for joining us. And just know that I'll be taking your warm wishes to Israel in a little over 2 weeks. And if you want to join me, let me know about it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Yasher Koach.